spend a little bit of time with that, if you don't mind, because you just hit on an experience that is common to so many parishioners,
sure,
right?
yeah.
No, because, so we'll talk about the full conscious active participation of the faithful that are gathered for liturgy, full conscious and active. And I've often thought and wondered, how does that translate for young parents in the pew with the kids running around, they're talking, they're distracting, and you're trying to be fully, as much as you can, participant in the liturgy, and you know, please shush, be quiet, and everything else. And I think of the glares that my own parents used to give us. So just how does that become for you in the pew a participation?
Well, I think that it's important to, just like you were talking about rethinking why we're there, sort of rethinking what it means to participate. So before we had kids, participation was like being involved in the singing, really focusing on the prayers, reverence, all that sort of thing, which is still very good and important. But when you have a bunch of little kids, that opportunity is not really there. So you have to sort of, you don't get to participate in the singing, you don't get to participate in the reverence in that same sort of silence. It's more about teaching the kids how to sit, trying to get them to be quiet enough that you can hear the prayer, let alone participate as a different thing. It's just very different. And then sometimes you leave completely. I've spent entire liturgies in hallways and offices, just trying to listen for that moment when we'll go up to receive the Eucharist and then we disappear again because the screaming and the yelling of kids, right? You just can't be in the church even. So it's a different sacrifice of praise, a different gift that way. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, but if you don't mind, I'd just like you to stay on that. It's a different sacrifice of praise. So for you as a mom, you know, there with your kids, and everything that you just described, how is that a sacrifice of praise for you at that moment?
Well, you have to sacrifice the way that you would prefer to be present in the liturgy. The way that you would like for your kids to participate or behave in church. You have to give that, you have to let go of that and change your expectations. You should still have high expectations for your children in church, but they're not always going to be met, and it's not always going to be that way, and you just have to kind of go with the flow a little bit.
Go with the flow.
Yeah.
Go with the flow. And sometimes I worry for parents in that situation in this sense, because you know that you're not just trying to participate in the Mass and everything, but you kind of, out of the corner of your eye, you're wondering, okay, am I getting nasty glares from other people in the pews, and what are they thinking about this? And that adds to the distraction. And the only reason I raise that is that I would just want to assure you and anybody else in a similar situation that I love the kids there. You know, the priests love to have the kids there, and we love to have the noise there. You
And
know,
often those looks from the babas, they're not actually meant to look mean. They just, it just comes off that way. And as a mom, you're so self-conscious because your kid just took his clothes off in church, and all this is happening, and you're trying so hard, and then you look over and that baba is like looking at you, like, oh, this person hates me, I've interrupted their prayers. But really, they just think it's the cutest thing ever.
It's the cutest thing ever,
And they're so happy to have you there.
Right. Yeah.
So you kind of have to
But I think it's important to reinforce that.
Oh, yeah.
Because
thank you. Absolutely.
sometimes you wonder, and you can easily misinterpret
Yes,
the looking,
it's
but
very easy.
it's wonderful to have the kids there. It really, really is. All right.
I think that's interesting because of the way we sort of need our kids to behave. I always sort of talk about how we you know, I'll correct my kids right away, you know, if they're goofing off or whatever the case is. And I like to think it's because I'm really interested in, you know, their behavior for their sake. You know, I really want to think that it's about, you know, I want you to grow up to be, you know, this person that, you know, is the ideal version and all the rest of that stuff. Right. But in reality, it's because it's reflecting badly on me, right? Like it's a very self-seeking sort of attitude. And I always like to think that, you know, the Lord isn't like that because He doesn't need us, right? And because He doesn't need us, He's free to love us in a way we've never been loved before. And the struggle of parents is to try our best to empty ourselves of this sort of temptation that we fall into of seeing, our kids' behavior as reflecting on us fully and predominantly. Of course it does, but to make that the priority means to miss out on what it is that what we're supposed to be doing, and the way we're supposed to learn being a parent from the ultimate parent, from our Father, right? So it's all lived out in the liturgy that way.
Yeah, and I have to say, I'm going to make a little confession. I didn't think I'd be making a confession.
We can step out if
No, it's okay. It's all right. Sorry. If you stepped out, I have nobody to make a confession. But it was an important learning moment for me when this whole thing about kids at Mass and acting up and all that stuff. And it was parishioners themselves that taught me a really, really important lesson. So this was when I was a parish priest years back. And it was the principal Sunday morning Mass. Right? And whatever was going on, I don't know if every kid and we had lots of kids. I don't know if they were all on a sugar rush or what was going on, but they were swinging from the rafters and they were noisy and running around all through Mass. And here's my confession, I was getting a little bit miffed as the priest, but didn't say anything. And at the end of Mass, I was greeting people as they left. And there was a couple of parishioners I knew pretty well, and I needed to vent a bit. So I was just talked about this, and they looked at me, they said, "But Father," they said, "it's just so Catholic." Yeah. And it really has stayed with me. I mean, Catholic in a couple senses. So, I mean, we love life, all right? And we're pro-life and pro-children, love children and everything. And so why on earth would we ever create an environment in our churches where children did not feel welcome or their parents didn't feel welcome? It would be inconsistent with who we are. But also part of that is just so Catholic. Catholic, we get the messiness of life, right? We should not be pretending to be other than who we are. And yes, your point is very well taken from earlier on about the reverence that's due in worship and everything else. That's not to put any of that aside, but at the same time, we come together as people that are messy, broken, all these sorts of things. And that's precisely what we bring to the Mass. In our self-gift, we do not offer, through Christ to the Father, an image, right? An illusion. We come as we are, and sometimes that means young parents coming with the kids, taking their clothes off in church, but I'm offering all to the Father through that. I'm glad the conversation went in this direction, because I didn't think it would. But it brought back that really, really important lesson that I learned as a priest from parishioners. It's just so Catholic, and it changed me ever since then, for sure.